At dawn, the first rays of sunlight sweep across the Nubian desert and strike the facade of a colossal temple carved into the cliffs on the western bank of the Nile. Twice every year, on February 21st and October 21st, the rising sun enters the temple's entrance and travels nearly 60 meters through complete darkness until it reaches the sanctuary. There, the sunlight illuminates 3 of the 4 seated statues. It lights the face of Ramses II, the temple's founder, portrayed as a king of divine status, along with Amun-Ra, the supreme god of Egypt's new kingdom, and Ra-Horakhti, the ancient solar deity who embodied the rising sun. Only Ptah remains in darkness, reflecting his association with the underworld. With this extraordinary alignment, Ramses II ensured that his legacy would endure not only through colossal statues, monumental temples, and inscriptions, but also through an astonishing masterpiece of astronomy and engineering that still occurs twice every year. Many historians believe the alignment may have been intended to mark the king's coronation or birthday, although no definitive evidence has ever confirmed this theory. For more than 3,000 years, Abu Simbel stood untouched, preserving one of the greatest astronomical achievements of the ancient world. But in 1959, a death sentence was passed on the temple. This time, the threat was neither war nor an earthquake. It was a modern engineering project that would submerge Abu Simbel beneath the waters of the Nile and erase its greatest miracle forever. Or so the world believed. In 1813, Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt was surveying archaeological sites near Aswan when he noticed something extraordinary. The tops of colossal statues were emerging from the desert sand. Burckhardt was unable to explore further. The entrance was completely buried, and he lacked both the equipment and the financial resources needed to excavate the site. Instead, he carefully documented his discovery in his journals. One popular local legend claims that a Nubian boy named Abu Simbel guided Burckhardt to the buried temple, and that the site eventually became known by the boy's name. However, no historical documents have ever confirmed this story. 4 years later, in 1817, the Italian explorer Giovanni Belzoni returned to the site with a team of Egyptian workers. After days of excavation, they finally uncovered the entrance. Unlike many explorers of his time, Belzoni found no gold and no hidden treasure. Instead, he stood before something far more valuable: an enormous rock-cut temple that had remained hidden beneath the sands for centuries. Although Belzoni could not read hieroglyphs, he immediately realized that the temple itself was the true treasure. Believing the discovery would secure his place in history, he carved his own name onto one of the temple's walls, a practice that today is considered damage to the monument. In 1819, an expedition led by William John Banks succeeded in clearing away even more of the sand. For the first time in centuries, scholars were able to enter the Great Temple, document its reliefs, and send detailed copies to the French scholar Jean-François Champollion. After years of studying the Rosetta Stone, Champollion had successfully deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs. During his expedition to Egypt, Abu Simbel became one of the sites that further confirmed the accuracy of his breakthrough, as he was able to read the cartouche of Ramses II carved across the temple's walls. By the late 19th century, engineers from Britain's Royal Engineers were assigned to stabilize the monument. Massive, unstable rocks were removed from above the facade. Protective retaining walls were constructed to slow the advance of the desert sands, and thousands of tons of sand were cleared away, revealing Abu Simbel more completely than it had been seen in thousands of years. Abu Simbel is far more than a temple. It is a mountain transformed into one of the greatest monuments ever built to honor a king. That king was Ramses II, who ruled Egypt for more than 6 decades, one of the longest reigns in recorded history. His rule was marked by military campaigns, monumental construction, and victories that he proudly carved into the walls of his temples. The most famous of these was the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, a conflict that eventually led to one of the oldest surviving peace treaties in history. Ramses chose to carve Abu Simbel directly into the cliffs along Egypt's southern frontier. It was more than a temple. It was a warning, a message to anyone approaching Egypt from the south. I am here, and the gods stand with me. The Abu Simbel complex consists of 2 temples. The larger temple is dedicated to Ramses II. Its monumental facade rises nearly 30 meters high and stretches about 35 meters across. Dominating the entrance are 4 colossal seated statues of Ramses II. Between the central statues stands a niche containing Ra-Horakhti, the solar deity, who embodied the rising sun. One of the 4 colossal statues is badly damaged, most likely the result of an earthquake that occurred during Ramses' reign. Each statue portrays the king seated upon his throne, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. At their feet stand smaller statues depicting members of the royal family, including Queen Nefertari, his mother, and several of his children. Above the entrance runs a frieze of 22 baboons. The ancient Egyptians observed that baboons often became active and vocal at sunrise, leading them to associate the animals with welcoming the sun god, Ra, each morning. The walls beside the entrance are covered with scenes showing Ramses triumphing over enemies from the southern lands, reinforcing the temple's role as both a sacred monument and a symbol of royal power. The temple extends nearly 60 meters into the mountain. Inside lies the magnificent Osiris Hall, where 8 massive pillars depict Ramses II in the form of Osiris, god of the afterlife. The walls surrounding the hall are covered with reliefs celebrating the king's victories, especially the Battle of Kadesh. At the very end of the temple lies the sanctuary, the holiest place in the complex, and what the ancient Egyptians regarded as the dwelling place of the gods. Here sit 4 statues: Amun-Ra, the supreme god of the new kingdom; Ra-Horakhti, representing the rising sun; Ptah, the ancient creator god of Memphis, whose association with the underworld explains why his statue remains in darkness during the solar alignment; and finally, Ramses II, seated among the gods themselves, reflecting his divine status as king. Beside the great temple stands a smaller temple dedicated to Ramses' beloved queen, Nefertari. This was an extraordinary honor in ancient Egypt. It was exceptionally rare for a pharaoh to dedicate an entire temple to his queen. Its walls portray Nefertari presenting offerings to the gods and depict her as the earthly manifestation of Hathor, goddess of the sky, love, music, and motherhood. The facade features 6 colossal statues, 4 of Ramses II and 2 of Nefertari. Remarkably, the queen's statues are nearly the same height as the king's, an honor almost unmatched in Egyptian royal art. Yet Abu Simbel's greatest achievement was not its size, or its political symbolism. It was an extraordinary union of architecture and astronomy. Twice each year, the rising sun travels through the temple and illuminates the face of Ramses II, deep within the sanctuary, a breathtaking alignment that has fascinated visitors for more than 3,000 years. Then, in 1959, everything changed. Egypt announced the construction of the Aswan High Dam, a massive engineering project designed to control the Nile's annual floods, secure water supplies, and generate hydroelectric power. But the new dam would also create an enormous artificial lake, today known as Lake Nasser. As the water level rose, hundreds of Nubian villages faced inundation. More than 20 ancient temples and archaeological sites, including Abu Simbel, were at risk of disappearing forever beneath the water. Egypt first attempted to save Nubia's monuments using its own resources. But the scale of the challenge soon became overwhelming. The country turned to UNESCO, calling for an international effort to save one of humanity's greatest archaeological treasures. In March 1960, UNESCO launched the international campaign to save the monuments of Nubia, calling on the world to help preserve Egypt's and Sudan's endangered archaeological heritage. The response was unprecedented. Nearly 50 nations answered the call. Engineers, archaeologists, architects, and conservation experts from around the globe united to solve a single, seemingly impossible problem. How do you move an entire mountain carved with temples? Before attempting the rescue of Abu Simbel, the international team first had to prove that monuments of this scale could actually be relocated. One of the most important early projects was the rescue of the Temple of Kalabsha. Built during the Roman period around 30 BC, the temple was dedicated to the Nubian sun god Mandalus, alongside Egyptian deities such as Isis and Osiris. Unlike Abu Simbel, Kalabsha was a freestanding temple, rather than one carved into a mountain, making it the perfect rehearsal for the far greater challenge ahead. The temple was dismantled into approximately 1,600 stone blocks, transported to a nearby island, and carefully reconstructed. Germany financed much of the operation, and in recognition of its contribution, Egypt presented Germany with the temple's Ptolemaic gateway, which is now displayed in Berlin's Egyptian Museum. As work on Abu Simbel prepared to begin in 1964, another priceless monument also faced destruction. The Temple of Amada, the oldest surviving temple in Nubia, built by two of Egypt's greatest 18th dynasty pharaohs, Thutmose III and Amenhotep II. Because its painted reliefs were exceptionally delicate, dismantling the temple was considered too dangerous. Instead, engineers chose a radically different solution. They reinforced the entire structure with concrete, lifted the temple as a single unit using massive hydraulic jacks, and slowly transported it along steel rails. The temple advanced only about 25 meters per day. As it reached the end of each section of track, workers dismantled the rails behind it and reassembled them in front, repeating the process again and again until the temple had traveled nearly 2.6 kilometers to its new location. Other Nubian temples were rescued as well. The Temple of Dabad was gifted to Spain. The Temple of Tafe was presented to the Netherlands, and the Temple of Dender was donated to the United States in recognition of their contributions to the international rescue campaign. Each successful operation brought the world's engineers one step closer to the greatest challenge of them all, Abu Simbel. Unlike the other monuments, both the Great Temple of Ramses II and the Temple of Queen Nefertari were carved directly into the mountainside. They had to be moved before the rising waters of Lake Nasser reached them. And above all, the engineers faced one final challenge. Not only did they have to save the temples, they had to preserve the extraordinary solar alignment that had illuminated the face of Ramses II for more than 3,000 years. UNESCO received dozens of proposals to save Abu Simbel. Some were brilliant. Others seemed closer to science fiction than engineering. The first proposal suggested leaving the temple where it stood, even after it disappeared beneath the water. A massive concrete barrier would isolate the monument from the Nile, allowing visitors to descend by elevator into an underwater archaeological museum. It was an extraordinary vision. But Abu Simbel had been carved from porous sandstone. Sooner or later, water would penetrate the rock, causing irreversible erosion and ultimately destroying the temple. The proposal was rejected. A French engineering team proposed another solution. Instead of moving the temple, they suggested protecting it behind an enormous crescent-shaped dam built directly in front of the monument. The concept appeared practical, but it would have been enormously expensive, and even the smallest leak could eventually threaten the entire site. The Italian team proposed something even more ambitious: lift the entire mountain. Their plan called for enclosing the temple inside a gigantic reinforced concrete structure, raising it with hundreds of hydraulic jacks, and constructing a new foundation beneath it. But nothing on this scale had ever been attempted before. The risks were simply too great. After months of evaluation, only one proposal remained. It came from a Swedish engineering company, and it terrified archaeologists. The idea was deceptively simple: cut both temples into enormous stone blocks, move them to higher ground, then rebuild them exactly as they had been before. To determine whether such an operation was even possible, the engineers consulted master stonecutters from Carrara, Italy, whose expertise had been perfected in the marble quarries for centuries. They were confident it could be done. The archaeologists were not. One mistake, one misplaced cut, one crack across a statue, and 3,000 years of history could be lost forever. After extensive studies, Egypt concluded that the Swedish proposal offered the safest and most practical solution. And carry the legacy of Ramses II. Discover the exclusive Ankh collection below. An international consortium was assembled, bringing together companies from Sweden, France, Germany, Italy, and Egypt. Thousands of engineers and workers joined what would become the largest archaeological rescue operation ever attempted. But before a single stone could be moved, the greatest enemy had to be stopped: the Nile. In April 1964, work finally began. Engineers constructed a temporary cofferdam of sand and rock in front of Abu Simbel, buying themselves precious time. Only months later, the Nile flooded. The rising water overtopped the temporary barrier. For a moment, the entire rescue operation stood on the edge of disaster, but the drainage system held. The first battle had been won. Next, Egypt's documentation center photographed, measured, and recorded every surface of the temple, every crack, every carving, every block. Nothing could be left to chance. Because Abu Simbel had been carved directly into a mountain, the mountain itself had to be removed first. Hundreds of thousands of tons of rock were carefully excavated using light equipment and hand tools. To protect the famous facade, Engineers buried the colossal statues beneath layers of sand, while an enormous forest of steel scaffolding was erected inside the temple to support its ceilings and walls. Then came the most dangerous stage of the entire project: the cutting. Power saws were considered too risky. Even small vibrations could fracture the fragile sandstone. Instead, hundreds of Egyptian workers, assisted by international specialists, spent months cutting the mountain by hand, slowly, patiently, stone by stone. Once each block had been separated, holes were drilled into the rock. Steel rods were anchored inside using industrial adhesives, creating lifting points for the cranes. Piece by piece, the mountain began to disappear. In total, the temples were divided into 1,036 carefully numbered blocks, each transported to a new site approximately 65 meters above the original location. By 1966, the final block had been removed. Only months later, the waters of Lake Nasser swallowed the original site forever. But when the Nile arrived, it found nothing. The greatest challenge was only beginning: rebuilding a 3,000-year-old monument from more than 1,000 individual stones. Using detailed maps, photographs, and meticulous documentation, engineers returned every block to its exact original position. Yet one question remained. If the temple had originally been carved inside a mountain, where would the mountain go? Rebuilding it with solid rock would have placed enormous pressure on the temple's facade, eventually crushing it under its own weight. The solution was another masterpiece of engineering. A gigantic hollow reinforced concrete dome was constructed above the monument. Instead of the mountain resting on the temple, the artificial mountain would rest on the dome. Hidden beneath the landscape visitors see today lies one of the largest concrete domes ever built at the time, containing ventilation systems and monitoring equipment that continue protecting the monument to this day. The reconstruction itself took nearly 10 months. The joints between the blocks were carefully concealed using specially colored mortar, making the cuts almost invisible. After 4 years of work, every stone had returned home. But one final question remained. Had they also saved the miracle? On the morning of February 22nd, engineers, archaeologists, and workers gathered in silence. For 4 years they had planned, calculated, cut, lifted, moved, and rebuilt. Now, nothing more could be done. The final decision belonged to the sun. As dawn broke, a single beam of light entered the temple. It crossed the long passageway, reached the sanctuary, and illuminated the faces of Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, and Ramses II. Only Ptah remained in darkness, exactly as he had for more than 3,000 years. Although relocating the temple shifted the solar alignment by approximately 1 day, so it now occurs around February 22nd and October 22nd instead of the 21st. The miracle itself survived. After being cut into more than 1,000 pieces, moved, raised, and rebuilt, Ramses II achieved exactly what he had intended over 3 millennia ago: to let the sun shine upon his face. Forever. More than 3,000 years ago, Ramses II built a temple to preserve his name for eternity. Thousands of years later, more than 50 nations, thousands of engineers, workers, and archaeologists came together to save what one man had created. Perhaps Ramses never imagined that his final battle would not be fought against the Hittites, but against the waters of the Nile.